Long before washing machines hummed quietly in modern homes, laundry was never truly finished. In every village, every castle, every crowded city street, there were always more clothes waiting to be cleaned. A stained tunic hanging beside a smoky fireplace. A wool blanket heavy with rainwater. A child's shirt stiff with dirt from muddy roads. The work never ended. For most of human history, washing clothes was not a weekly chore. It was an exhausting cycle that consumed entire days, sometimes entire lives. In medieval Europe, many people owned only a few pieces of clothing. A farmer might wear the same wool tunic for months before properly washing it. Soap was expensive. Water had to be carried by hand. Firewood had to be gathered slowly from forests already stripped thin by winter. And yet, even poor families feared dirty clothing. People believed unwashed fabric carried sickness, foul smells, and even bad luck. So laundry became one of the quiet burdens of civilization. It waited silently in wooden baskets. It hung beside riverbanks. It froze stiff during winter mornings. And somewhere, almost always, someone was scrubbing cloth beneath cold gray skies. Tonight, we travel into that forgotten world. A world of smoke-filled wash houses, frozen fingers, heavy buckets, and the long miserable history of laundry before modern machines. Before soap existed, the earliest laundry was astonishingly simple. People beat clothing against rocks. That was it. Thousands of years ago, near rivers in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, workers carried linen garments down muddy banks and slammed them repeatedly against smooth stones. The sound echoed across the water. Wet cloth striking rock. Again, and again, and again. Soap, as we know it today, barely existed. Instead, ancient people experimented with strange cleaning materials. Ash from burned wood, animal fat, sand, clay, even stale urine. Yes, urine. In ancient Rome, public containers were sometimes placed in streets so people could donate urine for cleaning cloth. The ammonia inside helped loosen grease and dirt. Professional cleaners called fullers stomped on clothing inside vats filled with water and urine mixtures. Imagine the smell. Steam rising into the air. Sweaty workers trampling tunics barefoot. The sour scent of chemicals and wet wool drifting through crowded Roman streets. It was unpleasant work, but strangely important. Clean clothing signaled order and respectability. Even emperors depended on laundries. Without cleaners, Rome itself would have smelled even worse than it already did. The riverbank workers. For centuries, rivers became the world's washing machines. Every morning in towns across Europe, Africa, India, China, and the Middle East, laundry workers gathered beside flowing water. Some carried giant bundles balanced on their heads. Others pushed carts through muddy streets before sunrise. At the riverbank, the day began quietly. Mist floated above cold water. Birds called from distant trees. Then came the sounds of labor. Splashing. Scrubbing. Beating cloth against stone. Women often worked shoulder to shoulder for hours, their hands red from icy water. Conversations drifted slowly through the morning air. Village gossip. Marriage rumors. Stories of harvests and illnesses. Laundry spaces became social places too. But the labor remained brutal. Wet fabric was incredibly heavy. Wool absorbed enormous amounts of water. Lifting soaked blankets could strain backs and shoulders for years. Some workers developed swollen joints before middle age. Others caught fevers after standing in freezing rivers during winter. And still, the washing continued. Because tomorrow there would be more. Always more. The smell of medieval clothing. Medieval life smelled stronger than modern people can easily imagine. Smoke from fireplaces clung to every fabric. Animals wandered close to homes. Sweat-soaked wool clothing during long labor in fields. Rainwater mixed with mud in narrow streets. And bathing was far less common than today. So clothing absorbed everything. To reduce odors, people sometimes stuffed herbs into garments. Lavender, rosemary, mint. In wealthy homes, small scented pouches were tucked into storage chests. But perfume could only hide so much. Washing remained necessary, even when it was difficult. Unfortunately, drying clothes created another challenge. Without electric dryers, clothing often stayed damp for days. Inside crowded cottages, garments hung near fireplaces where smoke darkened the fabric. During rainy seasons, some clothing never fully dried at all. The smell of wet wool became part of ordinary life. Heavy, earthy, smoky, permanent. Laundry day in winter. Winter laundry was misery. Imagine waking before sunrise in January. The room is dark. Your breath hangs pale in the air. Outside, snow covers frozen ground. And still, the washing must be done. Water sometimes froze inside buckets overnight. Rivers formed thin layers of ice that had to be broken apart before washing could begin. Hands numbed within minutes. Some workers wrapped cloth around their fingers for protection, but eventually the freezing water soaked through. Skin cracked painfully. Bleeding knuckles were common. And drying clothes became nearly impossible. Wet garments froze stiff outdoors like wooden boards. Families sometimes hung laundry inside tiny homes, turning rooms into damp forests of dripping fabric. Everything smelled wet. Everything felt cold. And because winter sunlight disappeared early, laundry workers often finished in darkness. Only candlelight flickered across steaming cloth and exhausted faces. The rise of soap makers. Real soap slowly transformed laundry history. In medieval cities, soap makers became important craftsmen. Their workshops smelled sharp and oily. Animal fat boiled in giant vats. Wood ash provided lye. Sometimes olive oil improved the mixture for wealthy customers. Good soap was expensive. Poor families often used rough homemade versions that irritated skin and damaged fabric. Cheap soap sometimes left clothing stiff and grey. But even bad soap was better than none. Soap reduced smells, removed grease, killed some insects, and gradually made laundry slightly easier. Still, washing remained exhausting physical labor. No magical bubbles existed. No scented detergents. No spinning machines. Only aching arms, cold water, and endless scrubbing. Castles contained entire worlds hidden behind stone walls. Among the kitchens, armories, and servant halls, there were laundry rooms. Hot, steamy, endlessly busy. Servants washed noble clothing by hand for hours each day. Royal garments were complicated. Heavy velvet, decorated sleeves, layers of delicate linen. Expensive fabrics demanded careful cleaning. Mistakes could bring punishment. Imagine scrubbing a queen's embroidered gown while knowing its value exceeded your entire lifetime of wages. Laundry servants worked near giant fireplaces where water boiled in iron cauldrons. The heat became overwhelming. Steam-soaked ceilings. Soap-coated floors. Workers carried endless buckets from wells deep below castle courtyards. At night, exhausted servants sometimes slept near warm drying racks, surrounded by hanging clothing that swayed softly in candlelight. The rise of Brazil. In the 19th century, Brazil becomes the dominant force in global coffee production. The scale is astonishing. Plantations stretch across the countryside like green oceans. Railways are built to move sacks to coastal ports. Warehouses rise in growing cities. Bankers, merchants, and politicians all watch the harvest with intense interest. Coffee shapes the nation's economy. In some periods, it is so important that the phrase "coffee with milk politics" emerges, describing alliances between regional elites and the dairy-producing state of Minas Gerais. History, it turns out, can be both grand and unexpectedly agricultural. You walk through a Brazilian plantation at dawn. Mist hangs over rolling hills. Workers move between rows of shrubs carrying woven baskets. Birds call from distant trees. The scent of wet earth rises with the morning light. Millions upon millions of berries are harvested, dried, hulled, sorted, and packed. Then they travel outward to the world. To New York. To London. To Paris. To Calcutta. To any city where someone sits at a table and thinks, "I do not feel fully operational yet." Brazil's influence becomes so large that weather in one region can affect prices worldwide. A frost in the hills. A drought in the growing season. And suddenly merchants on other continents become very concerned. This is tonight's historical fact. For much of the modern era, Brazil has been the world's largest coffee producer. The global economy, in a small but meaningful way, learns to pay close attention to the temperature of Brazilian mornings. Factories, trains, and the modern morning. The Industrial Revolution changes coffee once again. Steamships move beans more efficiently. Railroads connect farms to ports. Factories roast at large scale. Packaging improves. Coffee becomes more consistent, more accessible, and more deeply integrated into daily life. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, brands emerge. Advertising expands. Breakfast habits change. Office work increases. Cities wake earlier and work longer. Coffee becomes the quiet engine of punctual modernity. You stand in a roasting factory as great drums turn slowly over heat. Beans tumble and darken. Their color shifts from pale green to cinnamon, chestnut, and deep brown. The room fills with a rich aroma that seems to promise competence. Nearby, workers package the roasted beans into tins and paper bags. Train whistles sound outside. Crates are loaded and sent across the country. Soon, households brew coffee before sunrise. Parents pour the first cup while the house is still silent. Students revise notes under yellow lamps. Doctors begin hospital rounds. Writers face blank pages. Railway workers check schedules. Factory managers unlock doors. The modern day begins with a familiar ritual. Boil water. Grind beans. Wait for the first comforting aroma to fill the room. In the 20th century, instant coffee appears, followed by electric coffee makers, espresso machines, and a remarkable number of devices all claiming to produce the perfect cup. Humans are endlessly inventive when motivated by the desire to wake up. Coffee in the present day. Today, coffee is one of the most widely traded agricultural commodities in the world. It is grown across the bean belt, the tropical regions between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Major producers include Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, and many others. Farmers still monitor rainfall and soil. Pickers still gather ripe cherries. Roasters still listen for the crack of expanding beans. Baristas still refine techniques with the concentration of miniature alchemists. And sleepy people everywhere still reach for a cup before answering difficult questions such as, "What day is it? Where are my keys? Why did I stay awake reading about the history of coffee?" From traditional Turkish coffee to Italian espresso, from Ethiopian ceremonies to cold brew in glass bottles, coffee appears in countless forms. Some drink it black. Some add milk and sugar. Some add spices. Some create beverages whose ingredient lists resemble festive engineering projects. Yet beneath every variation lies the same basic transformation: a seed, heat, water, attention, and a moment of pause. Cleaning clothing was only half the battle. Then came ironing. Early irons were terrifyingly heavy. Some were solid blocks of metal heated directly in fires. Others contained hot coals inside. Both could ruin clothing instantly. Burn marks were common. Accidental fires even more common. Ironing demanded patience and constant attention. Servants spent hours smoothing wrinkles from linen shirts and formal dresses. The heat became exhausting during summer. Sweat dripped onto freshly cleaned fabric. And after all that labor, the clothes would eventually become dirty again. Returning to the basket, waiting silently for another wash day. Life at sea made laundry nearly impossible. Sailors often wore filthy clothing for weeks. Salt water stiffened fabric. Sweat soaked everything. Rain mixed with smoke from ship kitchens. Sometimes crews washed clothes by dragging them behind moving ships on ropes. The ocean battered the fabric roughly. Other times sailors simply rinsed garments in buckets and hoped for the best. The smell aboard crowded ships became overwhelming, especially during long voyages. Yet even there, people cared about clean clothing, because cleanliness meant dignity, even in terrible conditions. Before modern agitators and electric drums, people invented strange tools. One was the washing bat. A flat wooden paddle used to beat clothing repeatedly. Hour after hour. The sound echoed across villages. Thwack! 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 Laundry was physical punishment disguised as domestic work. Shoulders burned. Wrists ached. Back stiffened. Many older washerwomen developed permanent joint pain. But there were few alternatives. Machines had not yet arrived. Human bodies powered the entire cleaning process. Drying clothes near open flames created constant danger. One falling cloth could ignite an entire room. Many homes burned accidentally because of laundry, especially during winter. Families desperate for warmth crowded wet garments beside fireplaces. Sleeves brushed candles. Sheets touched sparks. And suddenly smoke filled tiny cottages. Entire neighborhoods sometimes disappeared in firestorms started by ordinary household accidents. Laundry was not only exhausting. Sometimes it was deadly. Even kings needed clean socks. Royal laundries operated like military systems. Huge staffs managed mountains of clothing. Sheets, curtains, ceremonial robes, napkins, towels. Servants recorded inventory carefully because losing royal items could bring severe punishment. In some palaces, laundries consumed enormous quantities of water every single day. Entire rivers practically served the monarchy. Yet despite luxury, the labor remained brutal. Behind every polished royal appearance stood invisible workers with cracked hands and aching backs. Finally, change arrived. Early washing machines appeared during the 18th and 19th centuries. Most were crude wooden devices with hand cranks. They still required hard labor. But something important had changed. Machines began sharing the burden. For the first time in history, laundry no longer depended entirely on human muscle. People were amazed. Though early machines often broke clothing and leaked water everywhere, they represented hope. A quieter future. A less painful future. As cities expanded, enormous laundries appeared. Factories washed hotel linens, uniforms, and wealthy households' clothing. Inside these buildings, giant steam machines roared endlessly. Workers moved through clouds of heat and humidity. Laundry carts rolled across wet floors. Steam whistles echoed through enormous rooms. It was efficient, but not peaceful. Industrial laundries became symbols of modern urban life. Faster, louder, harsher. Wars made laundry even harder. Soldiers marched in dirty uniforms for months. Field laundry struggled near battle zones. Nurses washed blood-stained bandages repeatedly. Soap shortages became common. Clean fabric suddenly meant survival. Disease spread rapidly through dirty clothing during military campaigns. So behind every battlefield, hidden from history books, laundry workers fought their own exhausting war against infection and filth. Electric washing machines changed daily life forever. Slowly, painfully slowly, homes transformed. No more hauling endless buckets. No more freezing riverbanks. No more beating cloth against stone. For millions of women especially, the invention felt life-changing. Hours of labor disappeared. Bodies rested. Time returned. Laundry still existed, but it no longer consumed entire lives. Today, modern washing machines work almost silently. People press buttons, walk away, return later to warm, clean clothing. It feels ordinary now. But hidden inside every gentle spin cycle is the memory of thousands of years of labor. Riverbank workers, castle servants, soap makers, frozen hands in winter darkness, endless buckets, heavy wet wool. All of them helped carry humanity toward this quiet convenience. And perhaps tonight, as soft fabric rests neatly folded nearby, it is worth remembering the countless forgotten people who spent their lives washing the world clean. The rivers are quieter now. The washbats are gone. The steam rooms stand empty. But somewhere in history, the sound of laundry still echoes softly beside cold water under grey skies. Long before radios, podcasts, or television, people sang while washing clothes. Soft songs drifted across rivers at sunrise. Slow rhythms helped workers endure endless repetition. Scrub, rinse, lift, twist. Again. Some songs were cheerful village melodies. Others sounded haunting and tired. In certain places, groups of washerwomen sang together so their movements stayed synchronized. Heavy blankets could be lifted more easily when everyone pulled at the same moment. Travelers sometimes described hearing these songs from far away before they ever saw the river itself. The sound floated gently through morning fog. A strange mixture of exhaustion and beauty. But not every worker sang happily. Some songs carried hidden sadness. Lyrics about aching hands, cold winters, absent husbands, or children waiting at home. Laundry work consumed enormous portions of life, especially for women. Entire afternoons disappeared beside water. Entire years disappeared beside steaming tubs. And still the songs continued. Quiet human voices rising above splashing rivers, trying to make difficult work feel lighter. In many homes, the night before laundry day felt strangely heavy. Dirty clothing piled quietly in corners. Buckets were prepared near doors. Soap scraps were carefully saved. Some families heated extra water before sleeping so morning work could begin faster. There was often a feeling of dread, because everyone understood how exhausting the next day would become. Children might be told to wear older clothing so nothing extra needed washing. Fathers returned from work and placed muddy garments near fireplaces to dry slightly before morning. Meanwhile, tired mothers mentally counted every shirt, every blanket, every pair of stockings waiting to be cleaned. Outside, villages slowly darkened beneath evening skies. Candles flickered behind tiny windows. Smoke drifted upward from rooftops. And somewhere in nearly every home, someone quietly worried about tomorrow's laundry. As cities grew larger during the 18th and 19th centuries, laundry became a world of its own. Entire streets were filled with washerwomen. From early morning until late evening, women carried impossible loads through crowded alleys lined with smoke and mud. Some balanced towering baskets on their heads. Others dragged wooden carts over uneven stones while horses clattered past in the fog. In cities like Paris, London, and Kolkata, public laundries became noisy rivers of steam. The work inside was relentless. Boiling water hissed inside giant metal tubs. Wet sheets slapped against tables. Iron wheels creaked overhead. Workers shouted above the noise just to hear one another. The air felt thick and heavy. Hot steam coated the skin. Soap stung cracked fingers. And every surface seemed damp. Some laundries never truly became quiet. Even at night, workers prepared water for the next morning. Bundles of dirty clothing arrived endlessly from wealthy homes, hotels, restaurants, and hospitals. The city was always producing more laundry. Always. Many washerwomen were extremely poor. Some worked while pregnant. Some brought small children to the laundry because nobody else could watch them. Tiny babies sometimes slept inside baskets lined with warm cloth while their mothers scrubbed nearby for 12 exhausting hours. And despite all this labor, many workers earned very little. Enough for bread. Enough for rent if they were lucky. But rarely enough for comfort. Still, every sunrise they returned again. Because the city demanded clean clothing. And somewhere beyond the steam-filled windows, elegant strangers walked proudly through clean streets wearing freshly washed fabric, never seeing the exhausted people who had cleaned it. Rain was the enemy of every laundry worker. Not war. Not dirt. Not even heavy fabric. Rain. Because once the skies turned grey for days at a time, everything became more difficult. In many old towns, clothing dried outdoors on ropes stretched between buildings. Long rows of shirts, blankets, aprons, and stockings fluttered gently above muddy streets. But during rainy seasons, the ropes sagged under the weight of water. Freshly washed clothing became wet all over again. Sometimes workers spent hours cleaning fabric, only for sudden rainstorms to ruin everything within minutes. People watched the sky constantly. Clouds mattered. Wind mattered. Even tiny changes in weather could decide whether laundry would dry properly before nightfall. Inside homes, damp fabric covered nearly every available space. Sleeves hung near fireplaces. Bedsheets draped across wooden chairs. Stockings dangled from ceiling beams. Entire rooms transformed into forests of dripping cloth. The smell became unforgettable. Wet wool. Smoke. Soap. Moist wood. And the faint scent of mildew slowly creeping into everything. Children slept beside damp laundry. Families ate meals beside damp laundry. Sometimes people woke during the night because cold wet fabric brushed softly against their faces while hanging nearby. And during especially terrible weeks of rain, nothing fully dried at all. Clothing stayed slightly damp for days. Heavy. Cold. Clinging unpleasantly against the skin. Some people believed damp clothing caused sickness directly. Others feared mold, insects, or rotting fabric. So workers fought constantly against moisture. They opened windows whenever sunlight appeared. They fed fireplaces endlessly. They rearranged hanging garments hour after hour searching for warmth and air. But nature almost always remained stronger. The rain kept falling softly outside. And somewhere beneath dark cloudy skies, exhausted washerwomen waited patiently for the sun to return. For most of history, stains were treated almost like tiny disasters. A dark wine stain on a nobleman's shirt. Grease on a servant's apron. Mud splashed across winter clothing. All of it meant extra work. And before modern detergents, removing stains became a strange mixture of science, folklore, and desperation. People experimented constantly. Some rubbed lemon juice into fabric beneath sunlight. Others used vinegar, milk, salt, or crushed chalk. In parts of Europe, stale bread was pressed against grease stains to absorb oil slowly from the cloth. Ash mixtures were common too. So was boiling water. Unfortunately, many treatments damaged the clothing itself. Delicate fabric sometimes faded unevenly. Wool shrank near excessive heat. Silk tore easily during rough scrubbing. And white fabric could turn yellow after failed cleaning attempts. Certain stains were feared more than others. Blood stains were notoriously difficult, especially before chemical cleaners existed. Families developed secret methods passed quietly between generations. Some swore by cold water only. Others believed hot water worked better. Arguments about laundry methods filled homes for centuries. Even royal households worried constantly about stains. Imagine spilling dark wine across an expensive embroidered tablecloth hundreds of years ago. There were no supermarkets. No stain removal sprays. No quick replacements ordered online. Every piece of fabric carried value because making clothing required enormous labor. So laundry workers moved carefully, patiently, examining every mark beneath candlelight. Sometimes scrubbing the same small stain for an hour or more. And even after all that effort, some stains never disappeared completely. Tiny shadows remained trapped inside the fabric forever. Quiet reminders of meals, rainstorms, hard labor, or ordinary forgotten days from long ago. Drying clothing near open fires was always dangerous. But during winter, families often had no other choice. Heavy blankets, damp stockings, and thick wool tunics hung beside glowing embers, slowly drying through the night. The rooms became warm, but crowded. Smoke curled softly toward dark ceilings. An orange firelight flickered across dripping fabric. Sometimes, exhausted workers fell asleep beside the hearth, too tired to keep watching the flames. And occasionally, a single spark was enough. One tiny ember drifting upward into dry cloth. Then suddenly, smoke filled the cottage. Families rushed through darkness carrying wooden buckets of water. Children cried softly. Neighbors shouted outside in the freezing night air. And burning fabric released a terrible smell. Thick, bitter, and unforgettable. Entire homes could disappear because of laundry fires. All from a single blanket hanging too close to the F. Winter laundry was perhaps the cruelest of all. Before sunrise, washerwomen stepped carefully across frozen ground. Their breath drifting pale into the dark morning air. The rivers looked peaceful. But beneath the thin ice, the water remained painfully cold. Sometimes workers broke the ice using long wooden poles. Other times, they knelt directly beside freezing currents, washing clothing with numb hands. Snow gathered quietly upon nearby baskets, and wet sleeves froze stiff in the wind. Heavy blankets became even heavier during winter, soaked with icy water. Impossible to dry properly. Many homes smelled constantly of damp wool, smoke, and cold stone. Some garments never fully dried at all. Families wore slightly wet clothing for days, because there simply was no alternative. In crowded medieval towns, laundry hung everywhere. Across windows, between rooftops, and above muddy alleyways. Long rows of stockings, aprons, and linen sheets swayed gently overhead, turning entire streets into moving forests of fabric. Travelers walked beneath dripping blankets. Horse carts rolled below fluttering shirts, and rainwater often fell from hanging cloth onto people below. But despite the inconvenience, laundry lines became part of everyday life. A strange kind of decoration. Soft white fabric glowing beneath pale sunlight. Colorful tunics moving gently in the wind. And during quiet evenings, the streets looked strangely peaceful beneath endless hanging linen. Soap was once considered extremely valuable. Especially good soap. Most ordinary families could not afford luxurious scented soaps. So people created their own, using wood ash, animal fat, and boiling water. The process smelled terrible. Heavy smoke filled the air. Greasy foam floated across large iron pots. And workers stirred the thick mixture for hours at a time. Some soaps cleaned reasonably well. Others barely worked at all. Cheap soap often left clothing rough, stiff, or strangely yellow. But even poor soap mattered. Because without it, removing dirt from heavy medieval fabric became nearly impossible. Even after the washing ended, the work still continued. Because clothing needed folding, repairing, and careful storage. Tiny holes were stitched slowly beside candlelight. Loose threads trimmed carefully by tired hands. Buttons replaced one by one. Nothing could be wasted. Fabric required too much labor to create. So people repaired garments endlessly. Again, and again, and again. Old blankets became smaller blankets. Worn shirts became cleaning cloths. And damaged clothing often survived for years longer than expected. Entire evenings disappeared into quiet sewing work. Families sitting together beside dim firelight. Folding laundry in silence. Listening to rain tapping softly against wooden shutters. Long before washing machines hummed quietly in modern homes, laundry was never truly finished. In every village, every castle, every crowded city street, there were always more clothes waiting to be cleaned. A stained tunic hanging beside a smoky fireplace. A wool blanket heavy with rainwater. A child's shirt stiff with dirt from muddy roads. The work never ended. For most of human history, washing clothes was not a weekly chore. It was an exhausting cycle that consumed entire days, sometimes entire lives. In medieval Europe, many people owned only a few pieces of clothing. A farmer might wear the same wool tunic for months before properly washing it. Soap was expensive. Water had to be carried by hand. Firewood had to be gathered slowly from forests already stripped thin by winter. And yet, even poor families feared dirty clothing. People believed unwashed fabric carried sickness, foul smells, and even bad luck. So laundry became one of the quiet burdens of civilization. It waited silently in wooden baskets. It hung beside riverbanks. It froze stiff during winter mornings. And somewhere, almost always, someone was scrubbing cloth beneath cold grey skies. Tonight, we travel into that forgotten world. A world of smoke-filled wash houses. Frozen fingers. Heavy buckets. And the long miserable history of laundry before modern machines.